Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Leeser with Tulsa Global Alliance. Welcome to this afternoon's Global Speaker Series presentation. Tulsa Global Alliance has created this series of talks as a way of engaging Tulsans virtually with the international community during this time of social distancing. And it's a time when international engagement and cooperation have never been more vital. And we hope you'll see today and through these other presentations the lasting good that comes from short-term international exchange programs. We're recording today's talk and we'll share it on the Tulsa Global Alliance social media later, including our YouTube channel. And if you have questions for our speaker after today's talk, please write them in the chat box or raise your hand or speak out. There are a variety of different ways to address your question. For those of you new to Tulsa Global Alliance, I'll just say a few words about us. Tulsa Global Alliance builds global community by working with the city of Tulsa to manage exchanges and activities between Tulsa and its 8 international sister cities. Tulsa Global Alliance also hosts participants in the U.S. State Department International Visitor Leadership Program, which is how our speaker originally came to visit Tulsa a couple of years ago. And Tulsa Global Alliance also promotes international business and global education. We're kind of in a time of transition now where we're doing a combination of virtual programs and in-person programming and sometimes a hybrid of both. Next week, for example, Tulsa Global Alliance welcomes our first international visitors in person since the pandemic began. We have the fire chief and a firefighter from our sister city of San Luis Potosi, Mexico, coming to Tulsa for a dedication of a statue at the Tulsa Fire Department Museum. And any Tulsans who wish are welcome to join us next Wednesday evening, October 27th at 5:30 at Marshall Brewing Company for a Toast the Travelers reception in their honor. And then next month, November the 17th, Tulsa Global Alliance will be hosting in person our annual Global Vision Awards Gala. And we will be honoring John Harper, a former board chair, Oral Roberts University, and Susan Neal, who's the director of the Gilcrease Museum. So today is World Energy Day, which was first initiated in 2012 by the World Energy Forum as a time to raise awareness of energy use and promote global decarbonizing efforts. We're honored that today's speaker is Professor Martin Jirus, assistant professor at Masaryk University in the Czech Republic. And in honor of World Energy Day, he's going to be speaking to us about energy as a tool in international relations. He works as an assistant professor at Masaryk University, and he's professionally focused on energy security in Central and Eastern Europe, geopolitics, and the transatlantic dimension of energy security. He regularly publishes academic texts as well as commentaries in media and takes part in international conferences. He's conducted several research projects in Central and Eastern Europe, Russia, and the United States. And he visited Tulsa through the U.S. State Department International Visitor Leadership Program in 2019. And he's currently a Fulbright Scholar at George Washington University for the 2021-22 academic year. Martin, thank you very much for joining us today. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. I'm pleasured and honored to be here with you, although it's not in person. But as I said a couple of times, if there's one good thing that came out of this pandemic is that we can get together on this very frequent basis online. Thank you for the invitation and for doing this, and for us. I also must say for the attention to detail, because your tie, I mean, it's on point. I mean, this is great. We need to talk later because I'd like to have the tie too. I mean, this is just perfect. But now, as it was already been said, I have a presentation slash a prompt for a discussion, because I would like this to become more a discussion than a lecture, if you will. So please feel free to shout out, raise your hand anytime during the presentation. Ask me questions, post your comments. I'll be more than happy to respond, and let's see how the discussion will develop, because I think sharing various experiences from both sides of the pond, this is what really keeps me going. Now I will share my screen with the presentation. Let me see if I can do that. Yeah, it's disabled. Bob, please, can you enable the screen sharing? I think it's in the security settings, if my memory of the Zoom calls is correct.
I just did it, Bob. Okay. It should be shareable right now.
Okay, it works now.
Okay, good.
Okay, so I hope that you can see my presentation now. Just let me know. Okay, perfect. Now, how do I? Yeah, here it is. Okay, so I was asked to do a presentation on energy as a tool in international relations, which is basically what I do professionally. That is my field of expertise, and a thing I've been focusing on for about a decade now. This is I was intended this slide as an introduction, but since Bob has already done that, I think I can effectively skip this. I come from Masaryk University, which is in Czech Republic. I mean, this is the other lesser known but very progressive lesser known university. You probably know Charles University, but we like to say that although we are the second biggest in the second biggest city, we are the best in everything else. Obviously, this is the older brother, younger brother kind of tussle that's between Brno and Prague. Anyway, if you're ever in the Czech Republic, please do stop by in Brno and come by to say hello. I'll be happy to give you a tour around our university, which is actually a university of 10 faculties, 30,000 students. So it's not a smaller one by any means. I'm currently at the George Washington University here in DC as a Fulbright research scholar, and I'm focusing on US foreign policy and how it reflects Russian conduct in the sphere of energy and energy security. So basically what I'm going to present here is part of, or the background of, my broader research project that I'm conducting here at the George Washington University as a Fulbright visiting scholar. So energy and geopolitics, and I'm formulated the title as this because basically energy in international relations, it's basically about energy and geopolitics. Although geopolitics these days is not the geopolitics people knew back in 19th century or 20th century when the politics was determined mainly by the geographical aspects. Now the geopolitics can take on various forms, and energy and energy security is one of them. On the general level, energy commodities and energy supplies and the flow of energy supplies are the key determinants for any economy, for a functional economy, and it's a determinant for economic power. And economic power, as some geopolitical authors can attest to, is the most universal power. It means that it can be easily converted into other different versions of power, most notably military power, because when the economy works, it can produce wealth, and that wealth can be then channeled into military, into building military power, into building armies. It works for both consumers and suppliers. Consumers obviously are dependent on producers and suppliers that provide them with energy commodities, and that keeps their economies in motion, while suppliers are dependent on the sales revenues, on the money they get from exporting energy economies, and that again keeps their economy going. Quite often, energy producers, energy suppliers are dependent, sometimes even vitally, on energy sales, and that dependence can actually turn against them, as I will later show you. So let's look at the issue from the producer's perspective first. These arrows here point to the fact that it's actually a recurring process. Natural resources is something that's occurring in the Earth's crust, and we cannot really influence the distribution of energy sources. So the uneven distribution is one of the sources of conflict. But at the same time, if a state happens to be in that lucky position with energy sources underneath, it can be a source of quick financial gains. It's basically energy resources, or natural resources in general, is a very easy source of money. At the same time, it's a commodity with a rather low added value. Basically, I always tell students, you basically dig it out of the ground, you put it on a lorry, and you ship it out. That's the way how it works, and that's one factor why it is called a double-edged sword, because such economy can get easily dependent on that easy source of income. Sometimes it's referred to as the Dutch disease, the reliance on a single sector of economy, and let's say malnourishment of other sectors, which means that such a state is susceptible to commodity price fluctuations and economy and the fluctuations in economic cycle. As it is such an easy source of income, as I said, it's very quickly can become an irreplaceable source for the state, and sometimes even just a single source of income, or just one of the very few. When you look at the states of the Middle East or other energy commodity rich countries, very often you see countries with with an economic portfolio that is dependent on that commodity production with very low diversification. That means it is very susceptible to the boom and bust cycle. And if commodity prices go down, so does the economy of that given state. And since the commodity usually becomes so important for that given state, the state itself often centralizes the control over these resources. And since its economic position and power in general is dependent on this production and commodity sales, the commodity is very often put in the center of attention of the state, and the state uses the commodity as a tool, as an economic tool, as a political tool, and therefore the commodity and the commodity sales often become vital for the actual stability of the state and the ability to project power inwards, but also most importantly for us as consumers, outwards. And this it's a recurrent cycle. So the stability of the state means that it has a limited number of tools how it can sustain the state apparatus. Therefore, it again turns to the resource mining, and it only strengthens the dependence on energy commodities, and the cycle just repeats itself. But as I said, and it is already obvious from what I've just said, it's what scientists often call the double-edged sword. So it's easy source of money, but once the economic cycle is in a downward spiral, the economy can go down very quickly too, and we've seen that in the past decade number of times. Last such instance was last year during the pandemic, when the oil prices basically collapsed, and the oil-dependent countries were hit very substantially. So we see basically something that I've already mentioned: energy-rich versus energy-poor countries. We can simplify it as producers versus consumers, and also a clash between the state-guided principle and market-guided principle of running an economy. More on that later. What is also important to recognize is that various energy commodities constitute various levels of dependency. In other words, not all energy commodities were created equal in terms of the level of dependency they constitute between the supplier and consumer, and that boils down basically also to the natural state of the commodity and the way how it is transported. The most notable difference is between oil and gas, which I will elaborate on later, but also, for instance, nuclear energy, where there is no dependence on the actual fuel, but there is a path dependence when a certain technological solution is selected. And this is very much related to an ongoing discussion that is currently present in Central Europe and the Russian technologies in nuclear sector. We can focus on that during the discussion if you will. So naturally, you would say, or people would normally say, that consumers are the weaker side because they are dependent on energy commodities supplied by the supplier, who has the hand on the valve and anytime can turn it on or off. But at the same time, the supplier is dependent on the income. As I foreshadowed on the previous slides, these economies are very often dependent on exporting this particular commodity, whether it's oil, gas, or anything else. So turning off the supply means turning off the source of income. And there goes the question, who's more resilient, whether the consumer or the producer who is dependent on exports. It's more like the chicken and egg question, and it's really very environment specific. Again, we can discuss this during the discussion later. But my point here is to say that it's not that easy that the consumer is the weaker side, because while the consumer has several ways how to tackle this issue, from diversification to energy saving or efficiency measures, the producer, the supplier, basically has to reform the whole economy that is dependent on the income coming from the energy exports. And that really makes a difference. So very quickly, a theoretical part of this whole issue and also my research, and I'm not going. I promise that that I will cut it short, not to be boring, but it is really important. When you look at this, there is a clear distinction between the attitude to energy policy usually assumed by producers and consumers. And I have already mentioned that producers or suppliers, for that matter, usually put the energy sector and energy commodity extraction in the center of attention and under the state control, because they are dependent on it, right? And that is very much in line in line with realism, and how it understands the position of the state in international relations. Realism says that the state is the central actor of international relations, and other state actors are there to destroy it. And these state actors basically fight against each other in terms of the what is called a zero-sum game, in order to acquire relative gains, meaning to have more than the others. As long as a state has more than the others, that means it's stronger, and it's fine, no matter what is the actual level of the gains, but it has to be that the state has to have more than the others. And energy is a legitimate tool in terms of realism, because everything in terms of realism has to be subsumed under the state's control and should serve a state's needs. While liberalism puts cooperation and market, the demand, supply, and access into the center of attention, where realism believes that there is only a limited amount of sources, therefore, as any state has to acquire as much as possible for itself. Liberalism says that even though there might be a limited amount of sources, if we cooperate, then the market can secure an effective distribution, even though this source might be finite. And this is really the center distinction. Liberalism also says that centralization and state control breeds market values, and that actually leads to scarcity. And we saw something like that during the 1970s oil crisis, when states actually accelerated the crisis by acquiring more and more, hoarding supplies to secure themselves against the scarcity, by which they actually amplified the scarcity in the system. Where realism says energy commodities are special because they are rare and there's a limited amount that therefore should be state controlled, liberalism says no, energy commodities are normalized. If we cooperate, if we leave it to the market and the demand supply directed distribution, everyone should have enough at a given moment. And liberalism says no zero-sum gains, no relative gains, but absolute gains, trying to maximize its own position. And you can probably see the difference, and you can probably, in your mind, you probably started to ascribe these roles to specific states. While the realism is often implemented by producers like Russia, states that are dependent on exporting supplies. They want to control them to make sure that everything works for the state. Liberalism is based on cooperation. Therefore, here the best example is obviously the European Union, which created a market that shares the risks but also the benefits. Coming from Central Europe, which is a really vague and fuzzy term, and this is again something that we can discuss for hours. But Central Europe as a region between the West and Russia that was formerly under the control of the Soviet Union, also has served as a transit region. Countries in Central Eastern Europe have been transit countries for energy supplies going in the east-west direction from the USSR/Russia to the Western Europe, supplying Central and Eastern European countries along the way. Energy supplies for Russia, for the Soviet Union and later Russia have been crucial. Economically crucial. One of the factors in the collapse of the Soviet Union in late 1980s was also the collapse of oil prices. It was another nail in the coffin of the Soviet Union. And Russian economy very much needed the hard currency. And has been in need of the hard currency ever since it started exporting these commodities. But the pattern between Russia being the supplier and Central Eastern Europe being the transit region constituted a dependency, a mutual dependency, which breeds conflicts. And we've seen a number of them in the past 2 decades. There is a supply dependency on one side, on the side of Central Europe, but there is transit fee dependency also in these countries, a dependency on these countries as transit countries from the perspective of Russia, and that resulted in conflicts, in rows, disputes, gas crisis, 2006, 2009. You probably know that natural gas supplies have played a big role in the ongoing crisis between Russia and Ukraine, and so on and so forth. But the impact of the dependency is related to several factors. And this is something that I've already mentioned. The first is the nature of the commodity, which I elaborate on the next slide. The nature of the market within which the commodity is being marketed. The nature of the actual infrastructure that distributes the commodity, and the legislation that regulates the whole market. Let's take oil and gas. Because these are the most commonly referred to commodities, and also the 2 commodities most of the energy world has been revolving around. Although, as I've already mentioned, nuclear energy has been also very much discussed. But let's take oil and gas as examples for the time being. So, oil is a liquid, obviously. And it's quite easy to be transported and stored. Therefore, the market is globalized, because you are not, as a consumer supplier, you're not dependent on a rigid infrastructure. Yes, there are pipelines, but you can also get oil by other means. Basically, tankers, trains, lorries, or trucks, if you will. You are not dependent on pipeline infrastructure only, and that is a big advantage. You can also store it quite easily. Basically, you can just put oil into a bucket and you can carry it anywhere, which you can't really do with natural gas, which is a gaseous commodity, obviously, and therefore it is very much dependent on the physical infrastructure. LNG has been changing the landscape rather recently, so most of the times you will be reliant on pipelines, because it's a gas, it needs to be sealed. Therefore, for most of the time, natural gas distribution and supplies and distribution has been relied on pipelines. And a pipeline can serve only so much, only so many consumers within its reach. Therefore, if there's only one pipeline within a reach of a country, that country or that actor is dependent on this pipeline, and that constitutes dependency and potentially breeds issues. And that is also the basis of how gas markets have developed. They are still rather partitioned or regionalized, if you will. Basically, a pipeline serves only a certain limited number of consumers within its reach. Then there's other market which is served by another pipeline. And also the contractual conditions are based on this. There have been contracts building on the rigid infrastructure, including long-term provisions, take-or-pay conditions, oil indexation, and so on and so forth. This is a complex topic. We can again discuss it later. But for our purposes now, it's enough to understand that natural gas has a rather limited way how to reach customers as compared to oil. And therefore, natural gas, that's why natural gas is so often cited as a commodity with the highest potential for being used as a pressure tool or policy tool, if you will. For a better illustration, I reached out to one of my older researches I did, and that is case studies of Central and Eastern European countries. which I think is very fitting for this purpose, because it clearly shows how dependence is constituted and how natural gas can be used as a tool, and most importantly, what are the conditions for natural gas being used as a policy tool. When you look at the Central Eastern Europe, which, as I said, is an ambiguous term, but it's basically a region between Germany and Russia, stretching all the way up to the Baltic region and all the way down to, you can also stretch the concept so much that it also includes the Baltic states, if you will, and Southeastern Europe, including Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. You can see that there is a really wide variety of energy mixes and supply settings. You can see countries with diversified import portfolio that are members of the European Union implementing rules of the common market. But there are also states that are outside of the European Union, unilaterally dependent or with very limited ability to get gas from somewhere else than just Russia. To cut it short, the early adopters that clearly stated their Western orientation in 1990s and rushed towards the European Union and NATO, and also adjusted their infrastructure accordingly, they have advantage, and they are much better shielded against the misuse of energy as a weapon. And for two reasons. They are very important. Both are very important, but one of them is even more. To be shielded against natural gas being used as an energy tool, energy weapon, you have to have two things: the software, but also mainly the hardware. The hardware is the pipelines, variety of pipelines, variety of supply routes, and clear and enforced rules, legislation. That's the software. So a country that is diversified, that has more than one source, that has more than just the Russian pipeline bringing gas to the country, should be fine. And if on top of it, it also implements the rules of the European Union, then it should be perfectly fine. And the evidence shows that there is a clear difference between what Gazprom/Russia can do on a market that is not diversified and not protected by the legislation, and vice versa. It's no coincidence that the overpricing and a wide variety of shady tactics takes place in those countries that are not protected by these two measures. Just very quickly, since early 1990s, late 1980s actually, since the Single European Act, the European Union, the European Communities, and later European Union has been progressing towards building the common market, also including energy commodities, namely electricity and natural gas. And within this progress, it imposed several legislative packages. One of them, the culmination of this effort, was the so-called the third energy package, which basically introduced market rules into natural gas and electricity. And basically, this change was substantial for any big players that until then dictated what the market would look like, including Gazprom. It was not just about Gazprom, even though Gazprom was trying to frame it that way, but all the big suppliers that were dictating the contractual rules, because they owned the pipelines, they owned the commodity, therefore they dictated the rules, were now not the market creators, but market subjects. There's a supreme authority, the European Commission, that dictates the rules, and anyone, any supplier, any market actor willing to enter the market needs to subscribe to these rules, including Gazprom. So it is no wonder that Gazprom, as the dominating actor, not just in Central and Eastern Europe, was very much against these rules that were introduced in 2009, because these rules, most importantly, include these provisions: third-party access, which means that anyone willing to enter the market, enter the pipeline, should be allowed to do so. So a competition, basically, a free competition, ownership unbundling. Formerly, it was a common thing that the supplier, the producer, also owned the pipeline all the way down to the consumer, meaning that it controlled the whole supply chain. And again, it basically constituted monopolies. Therefore, starting from 2009, this was effectively banned, and now there has to be a separation between who supplies the commodity and who owns the pipeline. Also, a prohibition of destination clauses. Formerly, suppliers put this clause, this provision into the contract, that there should be a stated end consumer of the natural gas, of the commodity, and it should be clearly stated, which basically prevented a reselling of the commodity to others and prevented free market from emerging. This is now banned. Also, because there was no global market for natural gas, it was a common practice, common thing that gas prices were indexed, were tied to oil prices. Because the oil and gas markets have effectively separated, and the commodities are now being used for different purposes, the oil indexation is also cited as unfair practice and is effectively banned. So the conclusion here is that the legislation, including these provisions and infrastructure diversification, is the effective precaution against energy being used as a tool in interstate disputes. So, and the general conclusion is the geopolitics is not dead. It's just not the geopolitics we knew as aspiring scholars when we were studying Meehan, Mackinder, and these grades of the classic geopolitics. But now geopolitics can take on various forms, and energy flows is one of them. Energy supply disputes and energy geopolitics, as I call it, is actually a geopolitics, international relations you can actually touch. You can see it unfolding before your eyes. Just a recommendation. I'm sure you have been following this issue, but if you pay close attention to what is happening around Nord Stream 2, there's a lot of things, a lot of events that can be marked as geopolitically, inspired, and it is very, very, very interesting. Natural gas, obviously, for the reasons I stated, is probably the most easy to use tool, but there are also other commodities that can be used this way. It always goes down to the scarcity, to the dependence between the consumer and the supplier. Energy can definitely be used as a tool or even a weapon, if you will. Energy weapon, after all, it's a term that's been coined in the early 1970s with the Arab oil embargoes, right? But there are definitely measures to mitigate it. So consumers are not really the ever weaker side of this equation. As a golden rule, the stable legislative environment and dense infrastructure, diversification of supply portfolio are the most efficient way how to shield yourself from being pressed against the wall. So thank you for your attention. I'm sorry I've been a bit too long, longer than expected, definitely. I'll be happy to hear your comments or questions. And if anything pops up in your mind later after this session, I'll be happy to get in touch with you. You can see, here is my email. You can also find my work on ResearchGate. Just type in my name and surname, and you will see what I do. I'm sure that Bob will distribute my presentation later. I have no problems with that. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Martin. We very much appreciate your presentation and your expertise in this area, and welcome questions from our audience.
I'll jump in. Martin, thank you so much. Great presentation. I always appreciate hearing a presentation from the perspective of countries that are state-owned energy. It's such a dynamically different market environment than what we experience in the US, yet some of the things that you laid out very much pertain to what we're experiencing today. So my question would be, we are experiencing, particularly with the new Biden administration on energy direction, and we were already trending towards the desire for more green or renewable energy sources. That has been accelerated in the form of political pressure to move greater energy production inside the US towards renewable sources. However, our demand and consumption of energy has outpaced our ability to produce from those renewable sources, leaving a significant gap that either has to be reconciled by less consumption or greater imported energy. So we're particularly here in Tulsa, there's a lot of frustration around the political pressure towards green energy sources because we have seen the request to OPEC nations to increase their production towards the US to make up for this gap, as opposed to simply generating the supply from the US and particularly from Oklahoma, where we rank a top 5 producer in both oil and natural gas. So would just be curious from your perspective, the Central and Eastern European perspective, what are you seeing politically in terms of the migration to green or renewable energy sources? And are you also seeing this trend where politically there's pressure to move faster than those sources are able to generate supply? And I apologize for the long-winded question, and let me know if I need to repeat anything.
No, thank you very much. I mean, these are basically, well, this would be for a long discussion. So I'm really regret that we can have a beer after this session and to discuss this in a greater detail. But this is you basically pinpointed some of the most important, if not the most important trends in the energy sector these days. And also what is important, what you actually mentioned, is that energy supplies is in no means a technical, or energy policy is in no means a technical issue. It's very much political. And generally speaking, energy sector is for me the perfect, in inverted commas, or not, depends on your perspective, the perfect entanglement between the technical and political world. Now to your question. So if I understand it correctly, your question is whether the market is actually not distorted by the politics pushing us towards let's say an avenue that is not sustainable. Is my understanding correct?
Yeah, because in the US it is. It's very difficult to argue that there's not a bona fide gap in the US between the increasing consumption of energy versus the generation of energy from traditional hydrocarbon sources.
I see.
And I'm curious if in Europe you see that same pattern, or if the European culture is to migrate towards green energy sources to the degree that it can keep up with consumption.
Well, yeah, I think we face similar challenges. That there is a source of energy that is relatively abundant and cheap, but politically we've been steering the development to the direction where we willingly refrain from using more of this energy towards energy that is at this point less reliable and maybe or more expensive for the greater good of having a cleaner economy. And I think this is a very tough political choice, because the easiest choices are made when there is no other way. But the point here is that the choice of greener energy is made in times when we seemingly still have the choice. There is no urgent need. I mean, like the world is not on fire every day, although we've seen a lot of things happening in greater numbers, and obviously there's the climate has been changing. But on a personal level, people don't feel it as much. Therefore, the pressure to implement these sometimes painful policies is not that big. Usually, when you see the changes on a gas station, that's when there's a clear pressure to do something. But you don't see it that much these days. I mean, although the oil prices have jumped back quite a lot, still it is relatively affordable. In Europe, in the European Union, for that matter, we have Green Deal. You may have heard of. Well, that was a popular name, but it just basically stuck to that. It's a goal to be carbon neutral by 2050, and there are like intermediate goals. The closest one is 2030, and it basically pushes to a greater to greater share of renewables. And there is a big political discussion and a big political role between states that are in favor of the Green Deal and states that are not that enthusiastic about that, if you will. The point is that it's a political decision. It's a political decision. Politics is not about what is objectively right or wrong. Politics is about policies, about programs, and the program that is behind that is to get to energy to carbon neutral economy. If you like it or not depends on your beliefs and on your own policy, on what you believe in, but that's what has been decided and agreed on within the European Union. The same way as Joe Biden's been elected president, his policy is to go that way. So therefore, I see similarities. And you mentioned that there are issues with renewables that cannot keep up, or that are to a certain degree unreliable because you cannot predict the output. They are not really suitable for a base load, and so on and so forth. But that's part of the policy. The need to find a solution to these issues. Therefore, we have discussions about which baseload sources are the best match for renewables. That whether it's natural gas, but natural gas has the baggage of being imported from Russia in Europe, and so on and so forth. So yes, to answer your question, I see similar trends in the European Union as compared to the United States. Yes, I see similar issues. I see similar arguments against this development, but I see the similar arguments for this development. So the same way as we've faced some similar regulatory issues in, for instance, natural gas, because in the US, there's been also a tradition of this rather rigid contractual conditions of long-term contracts, take or pay, and so on and so forth. The same way we've been facing similar issues in this energy transition, if you will.
Thank you, Martin. Other questions from the audience?
I have one, Bob. Can you hear me, Bob?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious. This is Kevin Chambers, and it's good to see you again, Martin. We met a couple of years ago, but I was curious, which country or countries do you think in Europe are most vulnerable now to leverage from Russia? Is Germany perhaps the most susceptible to leverage?
Thanks for the question. It brings us back to the geopolitics, which I like because this is my pet area, so to say. No, I don't think Germany is the most susceptible. Contrary to what has been said in the public discussion, I don't know the exact numbers. I would need to look it up. But Germany is dependent on energy imports and natural gas from Russia. But it's a big consumer, big partner, and the partner that Russia needs. So therefore, it is not vulnerable. The most vulnerable countries are those that are not that important economically or politically for Russia, and at the same time that don't have solutions to potential supply curtailments. I mean, Germany is a political heavyweight. So no one wants to mess up with Germany. No one wants to turn off the tap of supplies to Germany. Russia won't do that. If it ever happens, I think we'll probably have much more serious issues to solve than just this. To put it simply, if you know what I mean. The most vulnerable are those countries in southeastern part of Europe that are not members of the European Union, that are dependent on Russian supplies, Russian gas for most of their or their entire supply. Countries like Moldova, countries of the former Yugoslavia, Serbia, Bosnia. Also Belarus. There are interesting, but there are also other factors that come into play. But basically, these countries, the further to the southeast you go, the more vulnerability you will find. To put it simply.
Thank you.
I would just only add that the northwest part of Europe is probably the most flexible, the most fluid market. That's Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Germany, and north part of France. This is the most functioning market.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question?
Yeah, I see there's a raised hand.
Yeah, Cheryl.
I'm sorry, you're muted. I cannot hear.
There we go. I'm Dr. Cheryl Vanden Handel. I'm Associate Professor of Political Science at Northeastern State University. I'm going to be teaching politics of Europe in this spring, so this has been fascinating. Can you speak to the dynamics of the new pipeline coming out of Russia into Europe that the EU wants, and there are forces in the U.S. Congress that are using this as a ping pong ball and a pawn in the game of geopolitics?
Okay, sure. Thanks so much for this question. Oh my God, where do I even start? This has been a saga that's been ongoing for, well, since 2006, when the first string of Nord Stream was introduced. Then it was finished 2011. Then 2015, the deal on the second string. Then 2018 was started. The construction started. Then 2019, the current saga of sanctions took off, and now the pipeline has been finished. It's being filled up by gas and is about to deliver the first gas to Germany by the end of this year. this issue that the pipeline has been largely politicized. The major objection is that it's a clear energy weapon imposed or pointed by Russia to Europe, which I don't think is it's actually true. The pipeline does make sense in a certain way because it circumvents the Central Eastern European country. Well, some of the transit countries in Central Eastern Europe, with whom Russia has had a history of mutual conflicts, and also it enables Russia to save some money on transit fees. Also, it's a direct link to the most to the market with the greatest potential. Again, that's the northwest of Europe. Also with regard to energy transition and expected higher demand for natural gas in light of the energy transition in Europe. It's no coincidence that it connects Russia directly to Germany. Because, as I said, the landscape has changed. The natural gas market, now Energy Commission is in the driver's seat. The energy suppliers, including Gazprom, no longer dictate the conditions, and natural gas is a fossil fuel, so it will be diminished over the time in the mix. So Russia just wanted to secure its position in Europe and sell as much gas as possible, because energy exports are the basis of Russian economy. So it does make sense, contrary to what people say. It's not a purely political, purely geopolitical decision. It is political. The policy is based on Russian policy to capitalize on energy exports. Naturally, it also constitutes an issue because it enables to put a pressure on some countries, notably those that are dependent on Russian supplies and now will not be needed as transit countries. Case in point, Ukraine. And then that's the situation in Europe. The transatlantic dimension of this issue is no less interesting. It's also very, very important. The thing is that I think it's been rather politicized to the extent that the actual logic of the pipeline has been lost. What is also important is that the U.S. the pressure, especially the pressure of the previous administration, resulted in actual emancipation of the European Union in the sphere of foreign policy. When in 2020 Trump's administration threatened to impose sanctions on European companies involved in the project, then despite the fact that it's basically the Russian-German issue, the whole commission stood up and said, no, this is an unacceptable intervention into EU matters, and we will not accept this. So, I mean, indirectly, this whole thing contributed to emancipation of the EU in foreign policy. What I see now as the current development, the project is now waiting for certification of the German regulator. It's been also subject to a barter deals within the European Union. 2019, France, along with some other countries, was against the pipeline, not because it was a Russian pipeline, but for political reasons within the European Union. But it basically gave blank check to Germany, and it's up to Germany and German regulators to make it happen now. The pipeline is physically, it's been finished. Now the certification and the gas flow regulation waits to be approved. Why is it? Why it ceased to be? Why it ceased to be an issue between the United States and the European Union with the new administration? I think it's because Biden's administration favors good relations with the European Union and Germany over what is still a rather particular issue. Because the European Union and Germany in particular is a very important partner for the United States, and the United States, as I see it, with my European lenses, the pipeline is not that important. Energy relations with Germany, especially with a view to possible conflicts, economic conflicts with China, it's important for the United States to have a strong alliance and non-problematic relations with its European partners. Therefore, the issue was rather set out, I would say. Well, yeah. If that answers your question, because it's a very broad topic, we can discuss it for hours.
Well, thank you very much, Martin. It looks as though we've gone slightly over our allotted time, but I wanted to make sure that we kept the discussion going there, and we appreciate your insights. And I know that Martin has shared his contact information at the end of this presentation. So if any of you would like to get in touch with him with additional questions about energy as a tool of international relations, please feel free to do so. And we really do hope that during this year that you're in the United States at George Washington University, it'll be possible for you to make a return visit to Tulsa, because we would love to welcome you back to our city again.
Definitely. Thank you for inviting me to this interesting discussion. I hope that we'll be able to continue with the discussion in person. I'm definitely planning to come to Tulsa, hopefully next spring. So fingers crossed, I'll be able to see you, greet you, and to discuss it with you. Thanks.
Well, you mentioned having a beer and talking more about international politics. Martin was a guest at a Toast the Travelers reception in May of 2019 at the Holiday Inn, and we would love to organize another one for you if you make a return trip.
That would be terrific, yes.
And to those Tulsans on the call, we would love to see any of you who can make it to our Toast the Travelers next Wednesday at Marshall Brewing Company, and to the Global Vision Dinner on November the 17th. So thank you once again, Martin, and thanks everyone for joining us. I hope everyone has a great weekend.
My pleasure. Thank you and take care. Bye.